now we can quickly present it. This is now the half-year report. Yeah. So in general, I think with regards to distribution lines, we managed to build a number of these because there was an improvement, especially related to the rural electrification projects. Although we didn't meet the target of 1,411 kilometers, we managed to go up to 896, which I think was quite a fair performance. With regards to the fuel capacity upgrade, we moved from 80 to 85. Our target by half year, we were hoping that would have achieved 90, but we couldn't because the equipment had failed the initial factory acceptance test, so they had to move the target further down. And there was a fair increase in the pumping capacity. We had targeted 1.1 billion. We only achieved 1 billion point 084. So basically we are within the line, and I don't think it's a target which I would think it would be a challenge. The rest of the number of projects monitored, we were targeting 41, we went on to 134. This is because of these multiple projects which we had to supervise, especially with regards to biodigesters, because there were over 160 biodigesters which were built, some in this Mwenezi and then the others in Chipinge. Yeah. So we have a team which deals with monitoring and evaluation and also training of builders, masons for biodigesters. Awareness, we did a lot of awareness campaigns related. We attended a lot of these. There were a number of programs within the different provinces where we were exhibiting as a ministry, but also making people aware, especially related to clean cooking options, where we were exhibiting our clean cooking stoves, which will reduce the use of firewood. When it comes to issues of the next one is, I think those were the major. Obviously, on energy sent out, we were below target. We achieved. We managed to send out the actual local generation was about cumulative against a target of 3,910 gigawatt hours. We only managed 2,240. So we were below that target, and I think I've already explained what were the issues. We had also anticipated to increase the imports, but because of the import debt, we had to curtail some of the imports, and our imports cumulatively by June, instead of 1.2 gigawatt hours, we only managed 843. So, but we also did some exports which were also still below target. These are mainly targeting the requirements which we need for ZESA to meet its debt payment obligations through Namibia, part of it, and now we have increased some for Zambia. So I think those were the key issues which I just thought I would highlight, Chen, on the second quarter. Do you have the finance needs for the second quarter? Or you have the okay.
I'll be making a presentation on the second quarter in terms of the expenditure which incurred as a ministry. So in the second quarter, maybe just to say, the ministry has got two programs, which is the program 1, which is on policy and administration, and then for program 2, which is energy supply and security. So in terms of the budget, our budget was around 66,352,720. I think here we've already changed the currency from the original ZWL to the new currency, that's SIG. The revised budget estimates became 67,033,050. And then our quarter monthly target, our quarter target was around 10,048,882. And then the disbursements, that is the actual disbursements, were around 6,904,983. Then the actual quota, that is the release, which were made, were around 1.580088. The cumulative expenditure were at around 2,792,571. Only 4% was consumed. And then the variance of around 468,794. So the explanation which we have is we had a new budget upload, which was then adjusted to reflect the inflation which we had incurred. And then the budgetary releases which were made in this period were generally low. They were not adequate to cater, hence the variance of 844,68794. Then for program 2, we had an original budget of around 94,738. The revised budget became 94,963,131. The first quarter we incurred, the target was around 600,753,868. Then the disbursements, that is the actual disbursements, were around 641,32. But the actual which we received, the releases, were around 1,954,375. So our total cumulative expenditures which we incurred in that period became 1,021,870, which gave a total variance of around 4,799,485. The issue is still on the releases which we were given, which were not adequate. So maybe the total, just to summarize, the total for the period was around we only incurred 4,114,341, which then gave a variance of 13,568,279. That's all.
Thank you, Chair. I think these are the main performance targets. Maybe just my last, in conclusion, I just want to highlight that as a ministry, we are working on 2 critical programs. The first one is that of the development of an integrated energy resource plan. We have received funding from African Development Bank, and we already have a consultant on the ground. They are going to consolidate the various plans which we have done independently, which was the solar integration plan, the rural energy master plan, and the network, the electricity network development plan. Then we are going to also identify the other sources of energy which we can do. We expect this project, the plan, to be ready by March next year, because work is already in progress. The second project which we are also working on as a ministry with the assistance of development partners is that of what we refer to as the public sector energy efficiency strategy. We have identified various institutions within the public sector which will then be audited, and a strategy to reduce and improve the energy efficiency will be recommended. The project is also ongoing, and we already have a consultant. The idea is to ensure that apart from, whilst we have these challenges related to climate change, we want to create the energy efficiency culture, especially starting with the public sector. That's why we managed to look for development partners to work with us, and we are choosing clinics, schools, public buildings, hospitals. We have sampled at least each and every one of that type of institution, so that when we come up with a strategy and in future when we need interventions, we will then request that you help us as we then seek funding to implement these the strategies which will identify to reduce the use of energy in our public buildings. Always when we speak about energy efficiency, people point to government and say, your buildings have power on all night, so what are you doing about it? And we'll come up with strategies which will involve the automatic on-off switches where they detect occupation, and these are some of the strategies which, but they need money for them to be implemented. And as we move towards the future, once we have finished the integrated energy resource plan, Chair, we expect then to move away from unsolicited bids. As you are aware, ZERA has licensed a number of players in the sector, some who have moved on to implement their projects, but we still have challenges with unsolicited bids, and then we'll move on to competitive procurement and call for bids to meet the requirements, and this will be based on a least cost development plan. The last project we are doing with the African Development Bank is related to the wind assessment. We believe this country does have sufficient wind. We've identified about 6 sites which are being assessed for potential for wind generation, and it's very important to, and we are looking at this as another way of mitigating against climate change, where we are using all different sources of potential energy with the view of ensuring that usually wind blows more at night, and it will then complement solar generation as well. So these are some of the initiatives which are ongoing and the ministry is working on. And we are reviewing our energy policy with the assistance of the World Bank. This is a policy which we announced in 2012, and it was now overdue for review. We will be consulting Parliament as part of the review process. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, PS, and members who presented. I think now we can go into plenary. I'll pose a few questions first, which are of my concern. As a ministry, we understand that climate change is affecting us badly when it comes to generation. And we have put a lot of work on unit 7 and 8, and that's our backbone, I would think, currently. We have got units 1 to 6. I would like, the committee would like to understand your plan regarding that one, because we are not going to depend a hell lot on Kariba. So therefore, we probably should be increasing generation, even if we have to use coal. But because of the amount of carbon we are producing, we can get away with using coal. Do you have any plans of bringing up 1 and 6, either 1 by 1 or 2 at a time, to probably the specs of unit 7 and 8, so that we are assured of continuous base load in the country.
Do you want us to take one question at a time?
No.
Not yet. I think I will allow other members to pose a couple of questions, then you can go ahead and answer us.
Yes.
Thank you. I think I have a few questions. You mentioned that the wind and juice drought is also exposing new challenges. I want to understand, as a ministry, what's your disaster mitigation plan like? Because I think we've had many droughts. How have you dealt with them before, and why is it a problem now? Do you have a plan to sort of mitigate some challenges? And also, since 2019, to be mistaken, around the same time, we are always having challenges of power generation. Why is it that in 2024 this is still a problem? As a ministry, what kind of measures have you taken, given the experiences that you've had before, to deal with such challenges? We cannot have a situation where we are always having a recurring problem, same period, same time, and as a ministry, you're always giving excuses. What have you done to make sure that we deal with this problem? Because it seems like it's always recurring during the same period. Also, lastly, on the issue of biodigesters, I think you've hammered a lot on it. Do you have what can I call it? Do you have a report or sort of a study that you've carried out that you can also go through to understand the effectiveness and sustainability of this program that we are doing? We once had the Jatropha program. There was a lot of praise and sing as far as the project was concerned. But at the end of the day, Naja Yakatipa is a Zimbabweans. Is it also going to be the same case with this issue of biodigesters? Do we have a research? Do we have something that we can also go through to understand the sustainability and effectiveness of this program? Thank you so much. Those are my questions.
Yeah, I'll request if possible that I take, especially when there's multiple questions, we take maybe 6 at a time, and I think I could go through 6 now. Then we allow more questions to come up.
So I think we'll grant you that, Madam Pierce, you can go ahead and carry on.
Thank you, Chair. I think the first question you asked is what is going on with Wange 1 to 6, which is the phase 1 and 2 of Wange Power Station. I would like to say that over the years we were working on the assumption that we're going to get some funding from the Indian government. I think they promised us about 300 million. However, that 300 million was not sufficient to carry out the full repowering of 1 to 6. So what has happened is the ZESA has been scouting for partners to do these projects, and I think in there they did a statement around August where they actually came up with the name of a company where they are working with. One of the companies, I think it's called Jindal. It's an Indian company which is working with them to look at the unit 1 to 6 in terms of increasing from the current 285 to 840. And this program will be executed over 36 to 48 months, because it will be 1 unit at a time, so that we'll continue linking with old units, but we'll then be doing 1 unit at a time. And we are taking the opportunity now with Unit 5, which had a challenge with the turbine, to then start that work with Unit 5, which will then be able to come in sometime next year. So work has already commenced, and they are still quoting for other people to come in to work with us. And so that's the issue about Units 1 to 6. We will be following up with the implementation program and supervising and also overseeing that that part is from a strategic and policy point of view, because now ZESA reports under Mtapa from an operational point of view. But we are following all these issues and we are engaging them to ensure that as part of the energy strategic security plan, we have clear programs on how we are going to do this. So work is already started on Unit 5, and they will then be taking up one unit at a time as we go along. The reason why we are running these other units is because of the loss of the capacity in Kariba, which usually would have come in without much problem. We will see that we are now struggling because Kariba has not been able to meet its billing. From a disaster mitigation plan, I think if you look at our energy mix, Honorable Member, our mix incorporates coal as part of the strategies to ensure that we have a valid mix which gives us, even the Paris Agreement actually says each country has to look at its resource base and find ways of how they can address this. The critical issue which has happened over the past years is that we had not been investing in new generation capacity. And we are where we are today because we invested in Unit 7 and 8. If Unit 7 and 8 had not been commissioned, we would be having much longer and wider generation supply gap, which would have resulted in what some of our neighbors are doing, to go almost up to 17 hours of load shedding, which is not happening in this country. We still have at least 1,000 megawatts, mainly coming from wind, even from about 400 coming from the old plant, and another 600, which has been consistently supplied by 7 and 8, plus the imports. So what is the strategy which we have had? We have diversified our energy mix, built in new capacity, which was not there before. We've continued to import, but most importantly, what has changed is that from a pricing policy as government and through the regulator, ZESA has been given a cost-reflective tariff. The reason being that it has been an impediment in the past for developers to bring in additional capacity, because the off-taker did not have capacity to pay. So that change in policies is going to bring in new and different solutions. The second issue which we have done, which is different from the past, is that we've opened up the power supply sector, where independent power producers can now supply an industrial off-taker directly and use ZESA infrastructure for wheeling. We are doing this. There's a coal plant, the 50 megawatt, is actually supplying some energy intensive users as a way of ensuring that they can continue, and they intend to even increase that capacity so that they can target these energy intensive users. So we have also opened up the sector to allow even private sector to import in the case where the capacity to import and pay is limited with ZESA. That's why you have seen that companies like Simplus were able to import directly from Zambia to also complement the power supply situation in the country. We have remained open as government through the Ministry of Finance to support and offer some form of guarantee to new projects. This has been the biggest challenge in the past, where investors have projects which have proper feasibility studies, but financial closure was a challenge because of the issues related to the macroeconomic environment, which the government is working on, and that one is really dependent on the Ministry of Finance. So these are the challenges which we are facing, but we are no longer short of projects. So what I want to highlight to you, Honorable, is that we are expecting over 200 megawatts coming into this system by private sector investors for their own consumption. So it's different from the past where people were sitting back and saying ZESA is going to be the only solution. The private sector has taken its initiative. We are expecting 10 megawatts PPC to complement their power supply, another 20 in Collenborn. We are already commissioning 35 megawatts this year. It's not in the past. So that's why the supply gap is not huge. Because if you go to industry, you find that most of the industries, they put up solar and storage. And also as part of the mitigation, we are bringing in utility scale storage so that during off-peak and at night, we can store part of that energy. And you will see the improvements as we go. To be honest with you, if we did not have a drought this past year, you would not have had load shedding because we would have had sufficient power. The 800 megawatts we lost in terms of capacity from Kariba is huge. But if you look at the impact it has had, it's much less than what it would have been in the previous years. And what has also happened, we have a lot of these small mini hydros, about almost 35 megawatts. Because of the drought, they are also out. They don't have water. So the energy mix is key. So we are now bringing in coal, additional coal, and upgrading the existing units to ensure that we improve energy security. We are also hoping that soon we will have the gas from Zaraban. These are the strategic plans we have to ensure that when we get that gas from Zaraban, it will be converted from gas to power. And we have companies which are already looking at that. And I think some of them have already been licensed. So it's one of those issues where we are looking forward to the future and saying, what is it which we need? And those who are doing it for their own consumption is because government has supported through a policy, which is the renewable energy policy, to ensure that you can import your solar panels and all solar equipment duty-free. This is part of how we are mitigating the issue of long-term droughts. The climate change is going to happen, is continue for a long time, and we are also encouraging that people introduce more solar, and then we can now start using Kariba next year with more solar coming into the system, because we expect about 200 or so megawatts of solar. We will start using Kariba as a battery where we reduce generation during the day and then we increase it at night and increase the amount of solar during the day. So there's a lot of changes which are already happening in the system, including some private sector who are bringing in. We have Sky Power, they want to bring up to 500 megawatts. We have Nyati Solar, which is 100 megawatts, which is already work in progress, and they should be starting their construction in the next year, if not by the end of this year. So there's a lot of work which is going on to diversify our sources of energy, and also to diversify the sources of who supplies. That's why consumer initiatives are very key, and they are then complemented by net metering. So if you have more than you need for your own operations, you can then supply that to the grid. And we are mopping up any excess capacity from these own supplies to ensure that we can then use them to complement the national supplies. And then when it comes to biodigesters have been in existence for years, because biodigesters are basically built where you have a digester using cow dung as feed. And when the program was being done, it's been done for institutions for years. We have, I think, over 50 biodigesters for schools which are operational. And as the committee, we can go and show you. And they will show you how they are feeding them. There's one in Sandringham. There's a number of schools which are the bigger digesters, which then produce gas for cooking and for heating. But we also have these ones which we have put in for the homestays. Those ones are even doing better than just cooking, because when the household will wake up in the morning, get a bucket, mix cow dung with water, feed the digester, it will produce gas enough to cook three meals a day. We can take you to not give you theory, take you to Chipinge, where you speak to the villagers, because apart from the gas, they also produce concentrated manure, which they then use in their gardens, and then they can produce food. So it increases also food security. Why are we stressing on biodigesters? Because of the sustainability. You are using your own cow dung. You don't have to, if we use LPG, which is an alternative source, for rural communities, we'll prefer a solution which is self-sustaining. So if you are using your cow dung, you have your own kettle, you produce the gas, you use the slurry out of the biodigesters for your garden and even your fields. So that is a more sustainable solution, because then the villager doesn't have to always think about looking for money to go and buy gas from someone. That's why we are emphasizing that. It's a more sustainable solution, especially for our rural communities, because it addresses more than one issue. The Jatropha issue is not dead and buried. I think we have, under the Ministry of Higher and Tertiary Education, they were given about 6,000 hectares in Nyakatecha, where they have planted the trees, and obviously the production will take a bit of time. But they've installed a new plant, which is currently being commissioned, and they will start production. It's a process which will take time, but it's actually happening. So we believe that it's be patient with us. Trees don't grow overnight.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think we will carry on. Just before you carry on, honorable member, allow me just was another question of concern. It is actually happening to note that private sector is helping us on generation. Currently, is it possible that you can give us a ratio of public sector generation against private sector generation?
I can't give you the exact statistics here, because we believe it's much more than what we have recorded from the ZERA figures of those which are licensed by ZERA. There are a lot of, actually I discovered that in TechMine they installed 4 megawatt, which was not even licensed by ZERA. People are installing solar installations in farms. So what we have done is we've engaged the Zimstats. We are going to do a survey, which will then give you the correct data. But we can work out from the ZERA figures, and then we'll provide you later.
Thank you. Yes, we can go ahead, honorable members. Yes, honorable Dube.
Thank you very much, honorable Chair, and thank you very much to our visitors. Honorable Chair, as your committee, we were worried that this day and age you had a non-functioning website. And obviously we were saying for any organization to succeed well or to do well, it has to communicate well its services with its clients. It has to be accessible. But however, it is pleasing to hear that at least to that effect, the ministry is doing something to make sure that we have a functioning website. Perhaps our concern would be then to then say, okay, what is the timeline in terms of getting the website functioning? Are we not going to sit again in the next, or reading the next report that the website is still not functioning? Because we believe that communication is very key and very essential, but thanks that at least you are actually discretion making sure that you get the website functioning. Perhaps my concern would be the timelines. And that also goes with the issue of human resource. I think we were also worried that at least, for any organization as well to actually do well, the human resource is a very important tool. And obviously we were saying, indeed, if these vacant positions are very critical, surely there should be a timeline in which they should be filled. Otherwise there will be nothing happening in various departments because they are no human resource. So perhaps you already indicated what you are doing to this effect, but perhaps also our concern could be then to say, okay, is this going to be done within a reasonable time frame if these positions are very critical, unless if they are not critical? Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, I thought they would take more questions. No, thank you so much, Honorable. I'm happy that you are fighting in my corner when you are saying we need human resources, because human resources are key to function. And like I indicated in my submission, we have already interviewed positions. We've already submitted our request to PSC. I actually followed up again yesterday. I have a whole list of letters with me where we have been writing and saying we submitted this some time back, and we have been requested to resubmit some of the documents so that we can finalize that. So it's a very critical area to ensure that we get staffing. And most importantly, I think one of the issues which has taken me years to get through to was to get the approval for the ICT and communications. We are a very small ministry, but for you to have consistent supply of information and all these things I'm telling you, maybe you're not even able to relate to them because we are not communicating, we are not showcasing them, and that will be the role of the website. So we are working with our procurement and through our finance, because she is previously from Ministry of Finance. She actually is the one who said, instead of waiting, I think let's look for alternative service providers, because that's what other ministries have done, and that's what we then went on to do, because we were just following up and saying, when is your website up? When is your website up? And we'll be told stories, and we keep going on and on. So now we are looking for an alternative service provider. But what is also key is to have the communication department, which is being given the necessary information to put and upload on the system. And I think we are hoping that by the end of this year, once we get the concurrence, we are even discussing that maybe for some of the positions we might delay and bring in this critical resource, not the full complement, so that we start communicating. So that even if one department might be short by one person, we then seek treasury concurrence to say, let's use this already in the budget, but it's a vacancy, to fill in at least an every communications office. Because that way we are then starting the process of communicating. But all staff are critical and they are key. And also we have seen, especially for us, we also use engineers and, in some of our technical departments. And some of them leave. After 2-3 years, we're then creating new vacancies because of. So there is an initiative by the Public Service Commission to try and come up with some form of retention, because we are then continuously training new people, and when we think we are now moving forward, we are then So the issue of manpower is really close to me. I believe that it needs to be resolved. And from a timeline, I can check maybe with my finance director again, because I know that we went to tender. When can we get the financing for this?
I was liaising with the procurement committee. They are still yet to have it on tender. So I think we can allow us, I think up to the end of the last quarter we should be having a website. Because if they have it at tender and then we procure, we are then able to pay and have it up and running.
Because we did call in different service providers and we have meetings with them to appreciate what they can offer, and so I think let's expedite I think the other issue is also trying to define what is required, because they don't have the resources today. They don't have an IT or communications person. So I think I'll push this to make sure that by the third quarter, the end of the fourth quarter, we at least have finalized on the procurement side, because the funding is there.
Thank you very much, Piers. I think honorable members, let's see if we can have the last round also of questions, not just one. Then the Piers can help us with some answers. Honorable Nyati.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite happy to hear that biodigesters are doing quite well. But I then want to pose a question: why are we then not seeing promotion of these biodigesters throughout the country? Because they will ease energy needs in particularly rural communities. I also wanted to find out, you said you have I think you said Chimaniman, somewhere there. Do you have in any biodigesters in Matabeleland, where we want to assume is a region for livestock, so we expect maybe the uptake there to be much more higher than anywhere else in the country, because according to information that we have historically, we know that Matabeleland is a place where livestock rearing does quite well. So is there anything that hampers you from promoting this biodigester system in any other part of the country? Because I think you mentioned only 2 areas so far, and I think you mentioned a few other schools, but I didn't hear anything from the other part of the country as well. And then other questions would be, according to the ministry, what is the government doing on its own without relying on private sector? Because you've mentioned that you've got Zimplats, PPC, and all these other companies that have come online or that will be coming online, but these are actually catering for their own needs. Remember, they're also looking at their own expansion programs. So we cannot, as a country, say we are happy that the private sector is brought in so much megawatts into the system. That is for their own consumption. It's not going to the general populace. So what is the government's own plan in terms of expediting the supply of electricity? Because at the moment, we all concur that we've been hit hard by the low rainfalls, particularly that have affected Kariba. You've also mentioned to us that our local rainfalls only contribute to 20% of what we can use Kariba for. So we don't know what is going to happen to other areas where we expect catchment to start from. Suppose we are in this predicament for another 4 or 5 years. What is the plan as a government? Then number 2, I want to find out what are the initiatives in place to promote and develop renewable energy sources, particularly in rural areas. What have we done as a country to promote and to encourage people in the rural areas to have solar systems on their own. I think I will want to stop there.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. I will start with the last question. We have a number of private sector operators who the Renewable Energy Association who supply all people in Zimbabwe with renewable energy solutions. In rural communities in particular, we have, I think, one of the companies called Zone for Energy, who have been supplying solar supply systems. I think they've installed over 100,000 in this country in rural communities, and they specialize in these rural communities where they are selling some on a pay-as-you-go with, and they're doing this nationwide. I'm just picking up Zone for Energy, but there's a lot of companies which have come to the ministry advising us on the programs which they are running in the different communities where they are selling solar systems. And they also provide backup service for those systems. When they supply, they actually ensure that they look after those systems, and people are allowed to buy those systems over a period of 18 months. And it's happening in the country. Maybe you're not aware, but there's a lot of those programs which are going on. And then also through the rural.
Sorry, before you go ahead, if I can just can we have a list of these companies which are providing these services?
Yes.
Because we can actually encourage them to go into the urban areas as well, because we are also having the same problem with power. Maybe we can then engage them and ask them to visit towns where people are willing to come together to do this. If through which they can provide the list of these companies so that we approach them. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I will provide the list. I'll actually refer you to the Renewable Energy Association of Zimbabwe. They have a number of registered companies which are supplying solar to urban areas. If you go to all the new developments, you find almost every household has solar, honorable member. I'm not sure which. Almost every new development before they are connected to ZESA, they already have solar. So we have lots of companies, and I think some of the MPs I know used to even supply those systems. But we'll ask ZERA to also give you a list of those companies which they've registered, which they've evaluated, and why was the registration necessary? It's because some used to just apply, and if your system doesn't work, you can't follow up. So ZERA has registered companies which they evaluate if they have the capacity to supply, and they even have a program to train solar installers. That's how much is going on, maybe which you might not be aware of in this country, and it's been happening maybe for the past 6-7 years, where solar installers are trained for private sector, not for public sector, for private sector to actually supply solar to the communities, both urban and rural. I was just specifically telling you about rural because I know the companies which do this pay-as-you-go system for rural companies, and also even for urban companies. And there's there are lots of companies which are installing. One of the companies I can pick up is DPA, which is a subsidiary of Econet. They've installed over, I think, 20 megawatts of solar for their own consumption on their rooftops for industries. So we can ask them to give you a list of what they've actually installed. So there's so much which is going on in this country. Maybe it's not being publicized that much in terms of what people are having to supply. And this is why in 2017, the government did a statutory instrument on net metering, because they were targeting these people who are installing these systems so that the excess capacity can then be provided to the grid. And then in 2022, we we used to limit net metering to about 100 kilowatt system, but we increased that to 5 megawatts. So that the likes of Schweppes, we have a megawatt on them, and I think Varun Beverage installed maybe 2-3 megawatts now. They can now supply that net to the system. Why are we happy with industries and mines doing these systems? Because they are taking away the pressure from the utility to supply this. We know demand is growing and it's going to continue to grow. But government strategy has always been clear. If you go to NDS 1, we are going to be doing our own projects through the utility in terms of ZESA. That's why 7 and 8 was one of the critical projects, including the repurposing of the old thermals to bring in new capacity. But we already have a law which allows private sector through independent power producers to bring in power. And the project I'm talking about in Nyabira is not for their own consumption. They are actually an independent power producer which will be bringing additional 23 megawatts to the grid, and they are actually commissioning as we speak right now. So I just want you to be aware that whilst there is private sector which is doing own projects for own consumption, taking off the pressure from the grid, there is also independent power producers who are putting in their own power onto the grid to complement the supply which is already there now. So those are the two issues which I just thought is important. And what is government doing? Why are these IPPs able to do so? Because government has provided the legislation to allow them to build those power stations. And it's now an international phenomenon to say that power generation and power infrastructure is not the preserve of government. The private sector has been given the opportunity to also participate, and it's a business. And if we don't have power, it's actually an opportunity for the private sector to come in and fill in that gap. But what they want is to be paid. That's why in our policy as government, we then came up with adoption of the regional agreement of cost-reflective tariffs. And ZERA has gone on to implement those, because once the private sector pays ZESA, provides the power to ZESA as independent power producers, they are then able to be paid. But I also said, Honorable, that we have said private sector should not just build for their own. They can build and sell to other private sector, and the law provides to that, and then they use the national grid for wheeling. So we have opened up that space to allow for that to happen, because it's not a phenomenon in Zimbabwe. If you go to South Africa, private sector is building power plants and renewables. So it's a natural phenomenon to open up the space, because government, because of debt burdens, might not be able to get funding to build this infrastructure. But through private sector and triple Ps, we are then able to do so. Then I want to go on to the issue of the inflows, where you were saying that the inflows into Kariba have always had that 80-20, where the rains in northern Zambia and Angola provide the 80% of the capacity, northwest Zambia. And when we speak to every year, when we plan, we look at the meteorological data in terms of what are the projections for the following year. So even last year when we were planning, we knew there was going to be an El Nino induced drought. And if you look at the plans for ZESA, they were targeting around average of 215 from Kariba because of that statistic, and which had come from the meteorological, because it's all evidence-based. So we are looking now, we are planning based on what the SADC has projected for the rainfall patterns for the region, which includes the catchment for Kariba. So we know that we will be improving on our inflows, and those have been fairly accurate over the years. So we are aware of the challenges which we are facing. But one of the issues which I've said, and I'll continue to mention, energy efficiency is key, because we know that the way we are using energy is not efficient. And if we increase energy efficiency, we can create a virtual power station of over 300 megawatts by just changing the way we use the energy, which we don't have. And until that mindset change is ingrained in our minds, we will keep complaining when we can do something about it. And the solution will not come from government, it will come from everyone through campaigns, through work which we are doing. That's why for us, we have even requested for funding from partners to deal with public sector energy use, so that we come up with a clear strategy in terms of how we optimize the energy we have. But there's nothing which stops us because of the technological improvements and advancements to install our own supply solutions. That's the beauty of renewable energy technologies today. And maybe my last comment is that, as you are aware, we are one of those countries which have high sources of lithium. Maybe not just lithium, but all the other critical energy transition minerals. And one of the issues and strategy which we are looking at as a country is value addition, to create value, and if possible, eventually to the level where the technology itself is assembled here with other inputs coming from other countries. And that's where we want to go, because once we can produce sufficient storage capacity, then everyone can use solar without much problems. Because the biggest challenge to energy supply at the moment is the cost of storage. And once we can produce that storage, the lithium-ion batteries locally, and it's one of the strategies which we are looking at as a country, maybe which I have not highlighted earlier on, because part of ZESA's strategy now is they will put in utility scale storage batteries, so that during off-peak they can store power, then in the morning run those batteries up together with the other plants. So the battery storage system, I think, should be coming in later this year. But I can share with you the statement which was issued by Dr. Data with the plans which they have, especially to complement and ensure that we have the security we need going forward. And gas will remain part of our plans. And we have seen it with our neighbors. The moment we prove that the gas is there, we can start generating capacity, because you can bring in the emergency power generators which can come in and put up 300 megawatts within 3 months, whilst we are building up a proper plant over time. Mozambique did it, we saw it happening there, we witnessed it. When they were building that plant over 2 years, but they were already generating power using some emergency power gas generators. So we are not gloom and doom. We believe that we will continue, but we want a wider. That's why we are doing a wind resource assessment, which I mentioned. We have 6 sites which we have identified. We want to put wind turbines. We already have a licensed company which wants to bring in 100 megawatts of wind capacity here in Mamina. You will see that happening in the next couple of years, because they already are working. I think they already have a license, and they will be supplying Manise as part of their customers. So we are diversifying from what we've been using, which is Kariba in one, to solar, wind, mini hydros, and maybe in the long term, after 10, 15 years, we should be looking also at nuclear, especially the small nuclear reactors as an option. And we are working on as one of those countries which would want to see that happening through the International Atomic Agency, to start building the capacity, to build that capacity to do nuclear in future. But it's not something we are doing today. We are doing it in the next 10 years or so. That's the timeline we're putting for ourselves.
Thank you very much, yes, truly
So
appreciate
there
it.
was a question about the promotion of biodigesters. Honorable, at every district fair or whatever, we are going in there and encouraging people to use biodigesters. And apart from Chipinge, which I've spoken about, I think the project also is doing, we have some biodigesters program which were being done here in Lomosha. And those ones are actually doing the digesters, and even they store the gas in small containers which they sell to people there. I'm going to ask my people to so that we take you there and you see that people are already using these things. You might not be aware, but they are actually being used by the communities, especially those which have cattle. Then we also recognize that there are some people who don't have animals. And for those, we are using what we call social stoves, the energy efficient stoves, which can use branches and small pieces of wood instead of needing people to cut a whole tree. And those ones, they are about 4 or 5 programs where over 200 to 300,000 of these stoves have been given to communities. We'll do the list of those communities who have received stoves. My team were out in Murungwe and other places, and they are using carbon credits to provide these cooking solutions, especially where they are looking at reducing the use of firewood for those who might not have cattle, to them to biodigesters. So there's a whole program. We'll also list the areas which have been provided for, where these people are given, and the stoves, the people are given some form of GIS location because it's an audited program, given that they are using carbon credits, and they've been doing that over the years. But it's countrywide, so we'll just give you the different programs which are happening, especially on clean cooking, and we are working on a clean cooking strategy, which will then try and now come back to Parliament now to sort of fill in the other gaps which would have been left by partners, so that government can run with the program to then make sure everyone else is on clean cooking.
Thank you very much, Madam Pierce, for